Hello once again, everyone, and welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. I'm your host, David Waybright, and we're here today to talk about a game called Lunarchitects from Kitten Games. Here with me, as always, is Jeremy Salinas.
Welcome back, guys. This is a spiritual successor to Glenmore, one of my favorite games by Matthias Kramer. A really cool rondel system game in which players will be moving around a board, going from whoever's the farthest behind, progressing, and kind of jumping over each other.
This time building a moon base, not a farm.
Not a farm. Much broader audience, I think, with this style of game. And the components are fabulous. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about what you get in the game.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really sort of brings this one ahead. I mean, the components... Like
it's a huge step up from Glenmore. I mean, that's a fair assessment.
It is in many respects. The components are fantastic. If you take a look, all of them are either wooden pieces or the rockets are even like this nice heavy plastic.
Yeah,
when you hold a handful of those rockets, it almost feels like you're holding metal.
There's some weight to them.
Yeah, there's some weight to them. All the cardboard is really nice. But the one thing I want to point out, the graphic design and the artwork in this game are really, again, it's one of those games that's perfect for me. I like that playful art style. Particularly with this, it's interesting because the board and some of the elements have some sort of cartoony aspect to them, which I really like. But then the moon-based tiles are very technical oriented, but they're still colorful so that it has a really nice sort of fresh, clean, colorful feel.
Yeah. Gameplay-wise, very similar to Glenmore again. Again, you're building out your moon base. In this game, you're using hexagons instead of squares, tiles. And to start off the game, you will seed the board with one of the stacks of tiles. Now, there's 4 different stacks of tiles. There's initial, early, mid, and late. And these will come onto the board once one stack has been used up.
It really just lets the game sort of build, you know, so it brings out the juicier tiles later in the game.
So as you're building out the moon base, you have a performance and a review section of the board. This is where you kind of start the game. Everyone starts behind that line in turn order, with the last player being the first player.
That's the cool element about these games, is that last player gets to go, and depending on how much space there's left, he can sit there and go for a while before he passes everyone up.
And then you will leave a space between the first player in the game and then the next tile behind them. So the gameplay works like this. Whoever is the furthest behind gets to pick any of the tiles that they wish to go to. Each of the tiles in the game some of them do. Some of them have a cost associated with them that's on the left-hand side. Some of them have a one-time bonus that you immediately get and place onto that tile.
As soon as you place it.
And then the white section of all the tiles is an activation bonus. And basically what happens there is when you place it onto your tableau, you get that. And anytime a tile is placed adjacent to it, you also get that bonus.
So there's a little bit of a puzzly aspect as you're building your moon base, of course. There's a lot of limitations in how and where you can place your tiles, but then you're going to want to take into consider where you're placing something so you can milk it as much as you possibly can.
So each of the players will start with a headquarters, depending on what color that they're playing. Now, the cool thing is that each of these headquarters has different variable powers at the very beginning, or something you get to start off the game. And they are even double-sided, so you can choose between which ones, which of these resources you wish to start with.
One side is standard, so if you guys want to do a sort of a standard game where everyone starts with the same, that's one side. And the other side brings in the variable powers, which is always a big, crowd pleaser.
Each player will also start with one of these gray astronauts on their tile. These kind of acted like the clan leaders in Glenmore, and very similar to the roads and the river transportation networks in Glenmore, you have tubes and rails, which have to be connected when you place tiles around them. Now, the astronauts, as I said, they work very similar to Glenmore. Whenever you build around tiles, any of the tiles in the game, an astronaut has to be adjacent to that location.
That's one of the harder things for me to remember. I'd never played Glenmore much. But this one, grab a tile and you're like, oh, I know exactly where I want to place that. And then you've forgotten that you don't have an astronaut in the
Right.
right place. So it's a cool little one of those limitations about how you have to build your moon base for sure.
So how the game works, we're kind of midway into a game right now, and why don't you explain to them how you actually pick a tile? So just a note, also, before you get into that,
Right.
David, there's this white die in here. This is used for a 2-player and a solo player game. It's Spot the Dog, which you see on the table
And
here.
even 3-player, in fact.
Yeah.
Anything less than 4 gets Spot the Dog.
And basically what he does is he will move across and deny people tiles by landing on them when he is the furthest person back or the first player. And again, that's a little bit confusing if you haven't played Glenmore before, a play style like this. Whoever's in last place gets to move their thing. Now, why don't you go ahead and show us how movement is worded? We'll switch both of these around so people can see actual
Yeah,
player
there you go.
movement.
So, as Jeremy said earlier, whoever's furthest back is the player who's going to be moving.
And it's clockwise that you'll be moving.
And it's clockwise. So, if I'm orange, I can literally choose any tile that's still out here on the board. Now, if I go all the way around the board to quarters here, that might be a great tile for me, but it's going to be a long time before I go again, potentially. And then all the while, Jeremy can sit there and go tile by tile and really build out a pretty big moon base.
Right.
So if you're going to make a big jump like that, you want to make sure that it is for a tile you really, really don't want to miss out. Because that's basically the decision that you're making every time is like, well, I could go way up there and grab that, but then I might be missing out on a bunch. But if I don't, someone might take it before the next time I go.
Sure.
I have generally kind of erred on the side of taking as many tiles as I can, because I found when you build your moon base, you want to get that moon base out a little bigger so that you can really sort of tap into all of the different tiles as you're building it.
So, as David said, once you land on a particular tile, you have to pay its cost, if there is a cost associated. If there's not, it's a free tile. You have to place it adjacent to your current or any of your current astronauts on the board, and then you get to not only do the ability on the bottom, but all the abilities of the tiles that surround it. And then the tile, like I said, goes into your tableau, and then the next player goes, and you keep doing that process. Now, one of the actions you can take on your turn, either before your turn or after your turn, is go to the exchange market. And again, this works very similar to Glenmore, except in this game, there's only 4 resources, and I said, I believe 5 in Glenmore. The resources are food, rock, water, and air. On your turn, if you wish to buy a resource, you have to buy it on the turn that you wish to use it. So say, for instance, I had a tile that I needed to buy that required me to have food, which is the green one. I can go to the exchange market in order to get it. Now, the cost is whatever it says on here.
It's kind of a cool mechanism because the cost will grow. As someone sells food or buys food, the money goes on that table. So if someone bought 2 plants right now, it would raise the value of plants to 3, and you could no longer...
Yeah, so that player would have to put 2 money on this one and then 3 money on this. So it would cost them $5 to get 2 of the green. And again, when you buy from the exchange market, they have to be used on that particular turn. You can't stockpile them. And also on your turn, you can sell. Say, for instance, I had an extra green that I didn't need to use. When you do it, you simply take the money off the board, put it into your own tableau, and then get rid of the resource that you're selling. And again, you can't sell resources unless there's money there in order to take.
And what's really cool about this exchange, too, is not only does it give you the flexibility of getting some resources that you might need or selling off some ones that you don't, but you can effectively shut down sort of an economy.
Sure.
So if you've got a lot of things in your moon base that give you plants, and then other people won't, based on the fact that you've taken all those tiles, or a lot of them. So if you're able to buy some plants over time and fill that up, no one else can even buy plants from the exchange. They have to be sold if it's filled up to 3.
Right.
So it really kind of clogs things up for other people who are needing particular resources.
Right. So what happens at the end of that turn, once the pawn is moved, everything behind the last player is removed, and then it is refilled with tiles up until one space where the next player would go. And in this case, it would be Spot. So we just simply refill these 3 locations, leaving this one blank, and then Spot would roll his dice and go. And that's kind of the automated player in the game.
Yeah, Spot is pretty much the not-so-smart third player.
Yeah. So you will do that over multiple turns. The game scoring is different in this than it is in Glenmore, for the fact that in Glenmore, once a tile stack is gone, you then score depending on where your players are on the board. In this game, you're doing laps around the board. So once all the players pass the performance and review section, you're going to do a scoring, a lap scoring. The lap scoring is variable also in this game, which is really cool. It is this large tile that you see on the board right here, and I'll hold it up for you guys too. There are multiple ones of these in the game, and I believe there's 4 of them.
Yeah, there's 4 of them.
So you can change these out, but scoring is always for the same things. It's always for the number of rockets, the number of red tiles, and the number of crystals that you have. And it's just different depending on which one of these lap scoring that you do.
Throughout the game, the points you're going to earn are based on those 3 elements that Jeremy mentioned.
Yes.
That one is kind of straight up
just straight points for whatever
point
how
for
many
each.
you have.
And then some of these others are like if you have the most rockets, you get this many points.
Right.
If you're second most, and if you
even what round you pass it in. If it's the second round, third round, fourth round.
But it's cool. I mean, obviously, these things keep the game fresh. Everyone likes that sort of variability.
At the end of the game, once each player has passed the review section 4 times, there's going to be an endgame score.
Right.
And those are by the small tiles down here, and there are 11 of these.
Right.
So these are all variable too, and they are all kinds of different things depending on what kind of tiles you have, how much density you have in your board, if you leave open spaces that are surrounded by tiles, a whole bunch of different scoring sections. So it changes the gameplay drastically on the tiles that you choose from game to game, depending on those scoring.
Yeah, those in particular, I think, will really help change the game and how it feels when you play. The lap scoring, like you said, is based on those same 3 elements, just in varying degrees. So that's not going to change your strategy very much. But those end game scores, those can really change your strategy quite a bit. I played with my son just recently, and there's one here called Scarcity, where you get 8 points if you don't have any rockets, crystals, or red tiles. So as soon
It's
as
actually kind of hard to do.
It is. Well, if you want to score points throughout the game.
Yeah.
He sat there. He didn't score many points at all throughout the game except for a few times. But then he got 24 points at the end of the game. Ended up winning.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't think he could, but he used that and basically sat there and didn't collect any of those things all game long.
Yeah.
Took a few points and won it.
Interesting. So that is the game. Now, there are some extra stuff you can do. There is a single-player game. It uses some taxation, and you're basically competing against a particular score to have by the end of the game. And then there are these tiles here. Now, these are double-sided, and you can choose to use which one of these 2 bonuses. We'll talk first about this bonus. You're going to lay as many of these tiles out as there are players. And the first player to claim any one of these gets the points. So, for instance, the first player to have their tableau have a empty spot in the center will claim this, and they get the 5 points at the end of the game. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. The first player to get all 3 of the scoring tiles. You can also use, instead of using these, you can use the flip side. Now, these are the same on the flip side. They're just coffee mugs. And each player will get one of these at the start of the game. Now, there's 2 uses that they can do on their turn. It's a one-time use. They can choose to, on their turn, get rid of the coffee mug and move one of their astronauts anywhere on their moon base. That kind of opens up the ability for them to play tiles in the future. The other option they have with their coffee mug is at any time during their turn, they can choose any tile on the board and simply throw it out of the game. And not refill that position. So if they see their opponent going for a particular strategy, you deny them that particular tile. And if they don't use it, they simply get 5 points at the end of the game.
Yeah, and I think those really add a nice little extra layer of flavor to the game for sure. You put those things out there. And again, any game that gives you a little bit more direction of like, oh, I could go there for points, or oh, what's that? And you just got all sorts of decisions where you kind of grab your points and give players that lack that idea of what direction they want to go some hints and ideas about where they can take it.
And we didn't even mention this. This thing is awesome. This is one of the best trays I have seen. This compartment here actually comes out and lifts out.
Yeah, so you could actually keep all the tiles in this little sub tray, if you will, that you can use alongside the board. In fact, you could probably use the other tray too as well. And the way they have the storage built for the lap scoring tiles, they actually serve as dividers for the different areas for the different components. Yeah. Really brilliant. The bottoms of the trays actually have some embossed iconography for each component. Very, very nice. excellent touch. Again, particularly for a first-time publisher, that's the kind of thing that you really don't see from most board game publishers, and it was really, really nice touch.
So this is your first experience with a Rondell Glenmore style game.
For this type of game, yeah. I mean, I've played... The only other game I've played a fair amount of that had a similar idea is, Tokaido, where the last player is the one to go.
Sure.
It's a different game for sure. But I really like the Rondell system. Moving around, that decision, like I said, where you're like, I could go really far or I could just inch along. It all depends on what tiles are coming out.
Right.
And that's what's nice, because obviously there's a bit of, not luck of the draw, but you're pulling these tiles randomly off the pile.
Right.
The way that people get to mitigate that is they get that decision of like, oh, okay, so that came out. I could go all the way up there and grab it because it just came out.
Sure.
But then my opponents might get 2 or 3 tiles by the next time I go.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of Glenmore, and this is a giant upgrade to that game. Simply, I mean, Glenmore shows its age now. The graphic design, the old tiles. It's just this is a good update. Now, I want to talk about player count because to me, I've played Glenmore dozens of times, and I've always felt that it is the best at a 2 or 3 player game. And the reason for that is once you introduce 4 or 5 players, the amount of stuff, your moon base isn't quite as big because people are progressing around the board quicker. There are 14 spots, the same number of spots as there are in Glenmore. So the progression of the game is much faster, and you don't feel like you're getting as much out of your base as what you do in a 2 and 3 player game particularly. So I find this game really attractive as a 2 and 3 player game. It just feels like you're able to do a lot more stuff than in a 4 and a 5 player game. And I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah, well, I haven't played 5 players. I've played 3 players, and we've played 2 players. I mean, it's a great game at those player counts. I mean, there's honestly, for me, there's not a lot of games that are great at 5 players. Yeah. Like those games that...
You're just not a 5-player person.
I'm not a 5-player. I don't have that many friends. I'm not a 5-player game, unless it's a party game, you know, something like that. So I kind of gravitate more towards 2, 3, maybe 4 players at times.
Yeah.
And this game plays really well at all those player counts. Yeah. Like Jeremy said, the more players, the tighter the moon base is going to be. You're not going to be able to really build it up as much. I mean, the fact that you're basically moving around the same board, it doesn't really affect the time, the play length too much because the board's only 14 spaces.
Right.
So that's nice. I mean, that's one nice element because that's the one thing that I shy away from higher player counts is usually that means a 2-hour plus game.
Well, I mean, it's simple math. You divide 4 into 14, you're going to get 2 to 3 tiles each time around. If you do it by 2 players, you're going to get possibly 7 tiles, depending on where you go on the board. So, well, probably less than that with Spot because he's going to take some away. But my general thing I'm trying to mention is that I just think it plays better as a 2 or 3 player.
Yeah. Well,
that's just me though.
Certainly more satisfying because your moon base, you're able to feel more satisfied with like what you're able to achieve. Sure. You might have a pile of resources on your tableau.
This is fantastic, though. I mean, this for the first time publisher, as you said, this is a really high quality game.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, suggest it.
Oh, yeah? Absolutely. This is going to be a game that's definitely in my collection for sure. I highly recommend it.
Yep. This calls Glenmore for me. It's more of my artistic taste. I do love Euros. I do love cows and sheep and all that stuff. But this
like moon bases better.
I like my moon base better. Plus the components are super top notch. So that is Lunarchitects, guys. Go check it out. It should be coming out very, very soon to Kickstarter backers and hopefully in distribution here soon as well.
Hopefully. Yeah, I think so.
And make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel. That helps us out a ton. Follow us on Twitter. Make comments on our Facebook page. We are doing contests all the time. Keep checking in to see if you guys have won. Let us know your comments. Let us know how we can change the channel to your suggestions, or just make comments and let us know how we're doing.
Absolutely.
So that's Lunarchitects again, guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.